Hello and welcome again to another episode of One Starfish, where our mission is to help change the world one starfish or one person at a time. As always, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, all the stuff. That's how we get the word out. I'm excited for our guest today, Jaymie. This is my first time meeting her, but she's a transformational strategist. She started her business 8 years ago. She's writing a book, so we'll get into that when that's coming out. And she's a speaker, and she's just, her background, like if you're not on YouTube, like her background is like really cute. So I'm really excited to have you here, Jaymie. Thanks for being on.
I'm excited to be on with you, Angela. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So tell us like a little bit of 8 years ago, what got you into, what did you do before you started your business, and what got you into transformational, and there's a few things here. And what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, I get that often. I mean, for like, okay, what are we transforming? And I was like, well, what do you want to transform?
Right. Yes. I love it.
So really what started all of this was my own personal journey. I had to go first. And so before I became a transformational strategist and coach and intuitive, I really went on the journey of figuring out my own life and my own circumstances. And so I was raised by two drug addicted, gang affiliated parents. I was mentally, physically, and sexually abused starting from the age of 2 up until I was 13 when I left my home at 14. And I really went on this path of immense amount of pain and trauma. But in that moment, when you're going through it, you actually don't realize that other people aren't. You just think that it's normal and this is life. But I got to a point where I was so sick and tired and so unhappy and depressed and miserable that I just couldn't take my circumstances anymore. There was no way that I can tolerate the amount of pain that I was going through. And I really wish that I can say that everything started to change for me when I was 13, right? 13, 14 when I left. But no, what people didn't tell me is that just because you move into different places, you actually follow yourself everywhere you go. So I didn't leave myself behind when I moved. And so I found that I kept repeating the same things. I kept repeating the same situations, the same relationships that weren't serving me, friendships that weren't serving me. And finally, I hit a wall. I remember dropping out of high school when I was 17 years old and just working a whole lot, trying to figure out how to make ends meet, trying to figure out how to pay my friend to rent out their couch from them so that I can sleep on a couch and have somewhere to go. I was working 3 jobs at the time and just really figuring out how to make ends meet. And it came to a screeching halt when I found out that my dad had passed away due to drugs. And so it was kind of this long, drawn out process of him going to jail and then coming out and then popping back on drugs and popping back into the same routines. And finally, the inevitable happened, right? And so I remember I said that was enough. That was enough. So I decided to sell my car and I bought a one-way flight to San Diego, California. And I was like, I'm going to figure it out. So I moved in with my uncle, who is my father's brother, and he was a Marine. Girl. Here I am with 0 rules in my life, and I decided to move in with a Marine? Are you kidding? So everything was so rigid. There were rules left and right, and I was like, I can't tolerate this. So I had a job, a car, and a place to live within the first month of moving there. I was like, I'm out. I can't do all of these rules, and it was just crazy. And so I was actually living with my uncle, his wife, his daughter, and my brother, who was a year and a half younger than me, who's also the son of my father. And so we spent a lot of time together. We actually have different mothers, so we didn't spend a whole lot of time together previously, but we began to really build our relationship. And I was his big sister, right? I took care of him. I would help out. I tried to put him on the right path. And so 2 years after my dad had passed away, my little brother was murdered by a gang.
Holy.
And so here we are, time and time again, I'm just faced with more situations and circumstances. At this point in my life, I was going through the passing of my brother, dealing with the loss of my father. I'm at this point a mother to my daughter, who at that time was about a year old. And then I find out that I'm pregnant with my second daughter, all within a matter of months. I mean, it was just crazy. My body couldn't handle it. I went into just absolute shock. And I was at this point in my life where I was like, either I'm going to take myself out or I'm going to figure out how to push past this. And so I remember shortly after picking up my first personal development book, and I was like, I don't know what this is, but some lady in network marketing told me that it's going to change my life. And so I picked it up and I started reading and I started leaning in, and it became the redefining factors of what I wanted my life to look like. And so I became obsessed. I became obsessed with personal development. And it got me to a point where I started realizing myself and I started realizing my worth. And I decided to leave my marriage. I decided to leave my marriage with both of my daughters and $48 to my name. And I continued the journey of personal development. And I wish that I can say again that it was this easy transition, but it wasn't. There were lots of undoings and rebirths, right? But with every rebirth rises the phoenix. And so it was a lot of just different chapters of my journey, I'd say. But really, this is why I got involved with Transformational Strategist, is because I had to go first. And I realized that with all of the traumas that I've endured, with everything that I faced in my life, if I can change, other people can change too. And they can take back their power and they can go from being a victim to a victor of their circumstances, because it just takes a decision. And sometimes you've got to hit rock bottom before you make the decision. But change happens in a moment. But it may take 10, 15, 20 years to get to the moment to decide to change.
Wow. That's really good. Guys, I hope you're really paying attention. Change happens in a moment, but it takes some time to get there, but it really is as simple as a decision to deal with whatever's happening in your life and go through it or not. And, I think of this lady that gave you a book, and you just never know who you're going to talk to and what life. I mean, that's why we're doing this podcast. You never know what one thing, you were on the bridge of like suicide to a point of where, you're helping other people. You have 3 amazing children. And you're making a big difference because someone gave you a book, said, hey, read it.
That's funny.
And you actually read it. And how many people she probably told you to read a book that didn't read the book? Like,
right?
Yeah.
It's funny. You hear the stories of books falling off of bookshelves at the bookstore, or, people just running into a book or picking it up or being called to one. And I'm like, I was in network marketing at the time because I was a high school dropout. I had no options, no career with 2 children. And so I dove in and I won a book. And so I was like, okay, my first book, I guess I might as well pick it up and read it. And just mind blowing, but it was the first of many.
Wow. That is so cool. So, if you back up, you said nothing's off limits. So we back up throughout our life, you had a very emotionally challenging, physically, whatever, all of the stuff, childhood upbringing. How did you get through that as you transformed? Because our childhood really does influence our adulthood, but it doesn't have to define our adulthood. So how did you get through some of that? What are some tips and tricks for someone that's listening? Let's get into just some tangible stuff too. What are some tips and tricks for someone that's listening that could help them transform out of some of those situations?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I dive into that, I want to share a story that leads up to the deciding factor. I remember sitting in Chick-fil-A. I don't know where your listeners are, but if you have
Americans, Chick-fil-A.
If you are from America and you go to a Chick-fil-A not on a Sunday, it's like God's food. It's delicious. It's amazing. And I remember being there with my mentor, the woman that I just shared this book with me. And we were sitting there and I was expressing to her, there is no way that I can do this business. Like, everybody seems happy. Everyone seems fulfilled. Like, there is no fucking way, excuse my French, that I can do this. Like, I'm like burning down inside. Do you not see me? And she's like, I do see you, but do you really believe that? And in a moment, everything changed. I was like, and I remember saying back, no, I don't believe that. And really, everything inside of me was screaming, yes, I believe that. But this little ounce of courage, the mustard seed sized faith came out. And I was like, no, I don't believe that. So what was that?
Yeah.
I began to question myself. I'm like, well, if I'm telling her all of these things that I don't believe, like, I believe that I wasn't good enough. I believed that there was no way that I can succeed. But what was this voice? What was that came out of me for a moment? That had me questioning my entire existence. And so now through the lens of that, I started reading these books and I started waking up and going to sleep with podcasts and audio messages and things on YouTube to rewire your unconscious mind. I began to learn about the difference between your conscious and your unconscious mind. And I began to understand that my unconscious mind really wanted the best for me, but my conscious mind was holding me back because of my past conditions and because of my childhood. Now, really, that is what I started to do when I decided to change my life was I completely immersed myself into the experience. And I wrote down all of the things that I hated about myself. Every little thing, down to the physical appearance. I mean, that was easy to up with first at the time. And then I was like, okay, what else don't I like about myself? Well, I don't like that I'm so freaking emotional. I don't like that I complain a lot. I don't like that I always play the victim. I don't like that I blame everybody else for how my life looks. It doesn't make me feel good. I don't like this about, I just went down this whole list. I don't like that I was poor. I don't like that I was raised this way. I don't like that I still have all of these traumas. I went down, it had to have been like 100 different things that I hated about myself at the time. I couldn't even look in the mirror because I was so full of shame and guilt and fear and just I was in a hole, right? I spiraled down into the hole. And so when I got really freaking honest with myself and I lied all of that down on a piece of paper, I then did the contrast. What do I desire? What could I like about myself? What do I appreciate about myself? And what kind of life do I want to create for myself? Even if it seems crazy, even if whatever I wrote on the paper was like, I want to own a jet one day. Cool. Write it down. There is no judgment here. Write down whatever you desire for your life, even if it seems completely unfathomable. Write it down. And I began to look at the two different sheets and I was like, okay, who do I have to become in order to receive this blessing in my life? That is the other sheet of paper. Who do I have to become? Well, I have to become more patient. I have to become more kind. I have to become more gentle. I have to be more in my feminine. I have to be more receiving. I have to be willing to ask for help. I have to be willing to trust. I have to be willing to learn and expand into these other areas of my life that I desire to have these successes in. And I'll tell you one thing. I don't know your listeners' faith. I don't know, but I believe in energy. I believe in God. I believe in transformation and quantum leaps. And I believe in whatever you want, you can achieve, speak it into existence and it's yours. But when I asked God or the universe for the life that I was asking for that was on this sheet of paper, he didn't give it to me. He put me in situations to build my patience. He put me in situations that were exhausting and frustrating to build my kindness, to build my peace. I had to realize that every single obstacle I was going through was actually for me and not to me. And so until I decided, okay, how can I look at this differently? That is the difference between a victim and a victor. Can you look at your situation and your circumstances that you can easily blame somebody else, but yet decide to take radical responsibility for why you're there? The moment you can begin the process of doing that, which trust me, it isn't easy, but when you're reading nonstop personal development books and you're finding a mentor and you're working with a coach and they're helping you to release the triggers and the associations and the traumas, that's when it gets easier. And that's when you feel like you are really backed by the universe and you've got a team of people to support you.
Wow, that's so good, man. I love it. I'm just like in trance here. This is great. So, write down a list of what you don't like about yourself, which for most people, that's going to be really easy.
It's so easy, right?
Especially women, I'm going to say, but I think guys are the same. It's going to be really easy. And then write a list of what you want and what you like about yourself. And then who do you need to become? And I love how you said, I mean, that just hits home so much. The stuff that you go through is there to build you into that person. And I talk to so many people and they're like, oh my gosh, like life is so rough. This is so tough. I'm like, it's there for a reason. It's because you can handle it. That's why we're given the challenges we're given, is because we can handle them, not because we can't. So we can build our muscles to become stronger in whatever area, like you talked about patience and stuff, which is something I'm definitely working on. Got lots of testing on that. So we're good. patience and all that kind of good stuff. So that kind of started, that was a huge start into your journey into that. And then as you went, how did you, like, a lot of people talk about, things happen. And I mean, you went through a murder of your brother, which is crazy. Your father passed away from drug overdose, like some pretty, what they call big T, like traumas. How do you conquer not dwelling on them on a continual basis, or at least, I don't know, like you're allowing the past is still there. You know what I'm trying to say? Like you have those things that have happened in your life. How do you get through them without them being a continual cripple? Because I think for a lot of people, things like that end up crippling them. So how, what are some things that you would say to someone on that level to get past those major traumas?
Yeah, I truly, it's this place of acceptance. Like there's nothing that I can do about it. There's nothing I can do about it. And if I continue to dwell on it, then I'm just hurting myself.
Mm-hmm.
The people that I have lost wouldn't desire me to dwell on it. They know that there's nothing that I could have done to change it.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes we dwell in this feeling of I could have done something, or I'm in loss. But if you can just remember that each of those circumstances and situations are there to build your character and are also there so that you can utilize the pain. The reason why I overcame it was because I used it as my story and I used it as my fuel. I oftentimes tell my clients that, we can turn our pain into our passion. We can turn our pain or use our pain as our fuel for our purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you begin to change the internal representation in your mind of the situation, that's when you can begin to change anything and everything of your life.
Mm-hmm.
I used to feel like such a victim of my circumstances. I used to look back and be like, all of this happened to me. But if we realize that at any given moment, we can use it,
Mm-hmm.
we can use it and we can like foster the emotions that it comes with it. And we can use it as a compelling story to transform somebody else's life. You've completely changed the meaning of it. So often people keep themselves back and hold themselves back because of the meanings they've associated to an experience in their lives. And so when you begin to change the meaning, you change your life. And so for an example, if you close your eyes and you go back to a situation that maybe you don't enjoy very much, and you have a picture in your mind of what that is. You may not be aware of it, but if you close your eyes and you just, for a moment, you see it, you're like, oh, that teacher bullied me in high school. You have a picture of that teacher's face in your mind. But what if you allowed yourself to just play with the image a little bit? Play with the internal representation, change the submodalities like the color and the shape and the sound, and make it a movie instead of a picture. Maybe make it a picture instead of a movie. Just change the frequency around it. Maybe put a clown face on the teacher's face in your mind, and you begin to change the picture, the meaning, the association, the way that our physiology begins to shift because we've changed the picture in our mind. That is everything. So once you begin to change the meaning and the emotions that are with the meaning, then it no longer affects us how it used to.
So good. I love that. So I don't know where to go with this. There's so many places, you went through also a lot of, as a childhood, you said, physical assault. A lot of people have dealt with that. How are some things that specifically can help someone if they've been physically assaulted as a young child, to start to, especially as a woman, I'm going to say, to start to build, because I believe that would take your belief in yourself very low. So
Right.
how do you build that? How do you build that up? Like, are there associations? Are there books you recommend? Like, are there things that have helped you go from like a abused child, which has no control, to, a powerful woman raising her daughters, in a great partnership, all the stuff? What are some things that help in those specific kind of situations?
Yeah. So I'm going to do another backstory here so you have context behind it.
Okay.
So I have two abusers. One was my uncle and the other one was my stepfather. And so I was too young to really remember my uncle It happened when I was 2, but my body remembered.
Mm-hmm.
So I went my entire life up until a couple of years ago when I remembered feeling, this is going to sound a little woo-woo, I'm sure, to some people, but feeling like something had happened in the past, but I was blocking it out.
Mm-hmm.
And when it happened again with my stepfather, it was like this wasn't the first time this had happened to me. My body remembered.
Mm-hmm.
My mind blocked it. I was 2
Yeah.
years old, but my body remembered. And I remember having this conversation with my mother. I was like, I just remembered a memory, and this memory is going to be a little bit uncomfortable for you because this is your brother. And she didn't believe me.
Mm.
And so I remember this was a couple of years ago when I had this conversation with her. And I was like, I remember, and I need to trust myself on this one. And she goes, you don't think that it was him, do you? And I was like, I know that it was him. And she's like, we did live with him when you were 2. So it confirmed everything for me. It confirmed everything for me. Now, fast forward to when I was 13 years old, and it happened again with my stepfather. The incredible thing is at this point, my stepfather had already cheated on my mother with a girl around my age, and had cheated on my mother with a drug addict, and then got her pregnant, and then had a baby, which my mother adopted. Okay.
Holy moly. Okay.
The mother ended up passing away due to drugs. So now here is this boy, my brother, who is in our family by my abuser. So I then have to be fully submerged into this situation. And I remember getting to a point where this was going on with my stepdad for some time. And I went to my brother and I confided in my brother because it was my safe space. And my brother had went to my mother. This was my older brother.
Right.
But I've got 6 siblings.
Okay. I'm like, there's a lot of brothers.
Like, how are you talking about here?
How do I get these things all sorted out?
Yes. My older brother went to my mother and he was like, hey, Shumi, which is my nickname, Shumi's going to tell you that she was abused by our stepdad. And don't believe her because I think that she's just mad and she wants him out of the house. So my mom didn't believe me. Here I am. I didn't tell her until I was 14. So here I am at 14, finally built up enough courage to say something. And I was completely ostracized. I was kicked out of the house. My mom stayed married to him, continued to raise the son that wasn't hers, adopted him, and built this so-called happy family with this man, my abuser. Now, a couple of months ago, I got the news that he had passed away of cancer.
Oh, good. Wonderful.
Right. Yeah, right. And the incredible thing is I've done so much work around it that I actually felt sadness for him. Mm-hmm. And so I know that your listeners are probably in this place where they're like, fuck that guy. You don't feel sadness for him. But that's what
Something drove him to the point where he did what he did too.
Correct.
He just didn't work through it like you're working through it.
Right. And so I got to this point where I was like, wow, here is this man who felt that it was okay to do this to me, a child. I can only imagine what he went through in his life that he never had the courage to talk about. And I truly believe that cancer.
The abusers normally are abused. That's normal. Right. That is. And that's why you're breaking the cycle, which is awesome. And that's why I want to know how to break the cycle, because that's what it is. A lot of times it becomes a cycle.
Yeah, exactly. And so I got to this point where I was like, I no longer want to feel this in my body. You know, here is this man who did all of these horrible things. He was still in my life up until the day that he passed away. I held the boundary there, of course, but, you know, because of situations that you can't control, he never left the family. And so when I was doing my own work and I had to forgive, that's the number one thing. And that is not freaking easy. I'll tell you that much. It is not easy. For the longest time, I was playing the victim. I was like, you did this to me. You ruined my life. You took away my innocence. And I was angry. Oh my God, I was so angry. I ended up hating myself to where for years, I was giving my body away because I didn't learn how to respect it.
Right.
You know, when you're a child and you share this with your family member, you share this with your mother and you say, I was abused, and they're like, yeah, whatever. You learn, you begin to associate that your body isn't sacred and it's not special. And so I gave it away. I gave it away and I didn't care about it. I was partying, I was drinking. Like I said, I dropped out of high school. I was just running rampant, state to state, just having a good old time, masking all the wounds, ignoring all the signs, just living my best life. And so, you know, we got to a point where I was like, okay, I've got to do the work on forgiving this man. And I realized in that moment that I wasn't forgiving him for him. I was forgiving him for me. Because every time I had the energy to blame him and to shame him and to tell him how horrible he was, or to tell other people how horrible he was, I was giving my power away.
Right.
I was giving more energy away to what I didn't want in my life. And I was lacking the energy to put towards what I did desire in my life. And so the forgiveness process, the cutting of the ties, is to protect your energy and then build you back up. And so when you allow yourself to say, I forgive you, or I accept this for what it was, you can now take your power back and begin to shift it and shift your focus on what it is that you do want. And get to a point where you have empathy. Like I said, it was absolutely inhumane. And the actions that he did were unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And I can realize that he's a wounded child too. Mm-hmm. He was a wounded child too. And he had his own situations and his own demons and his own psychological, you know, mishaps in his mind. And so because of that, it gave me the power to step back into myself and say, wow, I actually feel sorry for that man, because he is going to continue to live the rest of his life as a victim. And here I am, and I overcame it. You no longer have a hold on me. You no longer hold this over me. And I'm stronger than you, and I'm stronger than this. And I'm going to live a life. The best fuck you is to live your life in joy while they still suffer, mm-hmm. until they make the choice to no longer suffer. Mm-hmm. But that's on them and not on me.
And a lot of times our body, you know, you mentioned, and we won't go down that trail, but you mentioned he passed from cancer. And our body, a lot of times fixes itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, forgiveness and all of that. And I think that that's powerful, because when you live in hate or any of those feelings, your body gets sick. Like, you know, I'm working through MS. And so I know that there's an internal battle that happens that creates a sickness in our body that's internal, not from external. And so that's kind of a powerful story. Okay. So how did we forgive? Then how did you just realize you didn't have the power? Were there things you did every day to help you overcome that, you know, that hate, that, you know, victim mentality? What are some things that someone can do tangibly to help them to get through and to forgive whoever it is they need to forgive in their life?
Yeah. So I really dive deep into this in my programs because we really talk about power and control. And so I'm going to just sum this up in a really simple
we got like a little bit. You guys reach out to Jaymie if you want more info for sure.
I won't share a whole backstory this time because that one takes too long, but I will share power and control. So when you are in your power, you are operating from a locus of power from within you. But when we are trying to control situations, we oftentimes look at the environment and say, I want to change this or change this and change this. If I change my relationship, then I will be happy. If I change where I live, then I will be happy. If I make more money, then I will be happy. If this never happened to me, then I would be happy. However, the best way that we can go about it is taking an internal look at ourselves and saying, okay, if I feel like I need to change the external in order to be internally happy, then I'm doing it the wrong way. The number one thing that I would recommend for you to do is look in the mirror versus looking outside of the window. You've got to be willing to look in the mirror at yourself and say, how is this a projection of my internal feelings? This is 99% of the work, is gaining clarity on who you are and what is triggering you. And so if you can say, okay, I am actually triggered by this person's actions because I feel like I am no longer respectful. I don't respect myself anymore. I'm no longer lovable. I'm no longer desirable, or I feel shame in my body. Those are all actions of self.
Mm-hmm.
You made that association to the situation. Again, I'm not condoning the experience, and I validate you in your experience because it is your reality.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are in a position where you are desiring to take back your power, we've got to step into our strength. You've got to be willing to let the ego fall to the side so that you can recognize yourself and you can witness yourself and you can have compassion for yourself and empathy for yourself and love for yourself. Because the moment we can begin to do that in the mirror, that is when our reality shifts outside of us. If you have it within you, I want you to imagine a like a squirt gun, right? You're like pumping it, you're priming it, and you're priming it. Whatever is inside of the squirt gun becomes the reality outside. So if we apply enough pressure, whatever is inside of us will come out. And so is that anger? Is that sadness? Is that shame? Is that guilt? Is it fear? Or is it love, peace, joy, forgiveness, empathy? You get to decide.
Oh, that is so good. I know we could go forever and ever, but this would be hours. We'll definitely have you back again. But I do want to respect our listeners' time. I'll respect your time. So I always wrap up with 3 final questions and then anything you want to leave our listeners with. Guys, like I said, obviously, I know you got a lot of value. Make sure to share this episode with everybody that you possibly can. So 3 final questions. Number 1 is if someone's looking for their purpose, you've definitely found your purpose. If someone's looking for their purpose, what is 1 word or sentence that you would say that could help them find their purpose?
So the number 1 thing that I would say is take a look at your values. Your values always lead you to your purpose.
Awesome. I love that. Number 2, and I'm sure you have more than one, but right now, what's a favorite quote and why?
If the dream is in you, it is for you. And why is because we all have this innate sense of knowing within our bodies. And if you have this little inkling, this little feeling like you should be doing something, that is purpose, and lean into it.
So good. Last question. What's 1 word or sentence you want on your gravestone?
With love.
So good. All right. So Jaymie, you run into someone at a coffee shop and they're like, wow, that was amazing. You conquered so much stuff and helping other people and stepping your purpose. It was incredible. What's one thing that we didn't touch on that you just think is really important to leave our listeners with?
There's quite a few, but I guess the number 1 thing that I would say is you got to lean in. You got to lean in. There's so much unused potential out there. And if people really understood the magnitude of their being and how special they really are, the world can completely change in a moment. And so I invite you to take a look. I invite you to expand. I invite you to receive because there's so much power within you and I'm excited for you to see it.
Wow, so good. All right, guys, make sure to rate, review, subscribe. Let's go out there. Let's change the world 1 starfish or 1 person at a time. If we change 1 life or 1 starfish at a time together, we can change the world. Thank you so much for being on, Jaymie.
Thank you so much for having me, Angela.